She says, "You got it wrong. The police didn't find the body, I did."
Hi, Billy.
The police soon had a prime suspect, Billy Dunlop, who was lodging 2 streets from Julie's house. Detectives discovered he'd attended a bawdy strip show organised by Billingham Rugby Club the night before Julie disappeared. He'd been drinking heavily, mixing rum, vodka and cider. The night ended with Dunlop involved in a vicious brawl that left his opponent in hospital. Dunlop's account of what happened later aroused the suspicions of the murder squad. He said he went to visit a friend who lived close to Julie, then went back to his digs. But witnesses cast doubt on this. The police felt he was lying and arrested him.
Hi, Billy.
Neighbours only saw the Jack the Lad side of Billy Dunlop, but he was a Jekyll and Hyde character, according to the woman who once shared his life.
He came across as such a nice person, you know, Mr. Nice Guy, in front of people, making cups of tea, doing the housework, doing the cleaning, perfect father. But as soon as that door was shut, he was a completely different person.
Dunlop was an aggressive amateur rugby player. He turned out for Billingham, where he and his friends were known as the Crazy Gang because of their outrageous drunken behaviour. But he was also violent at home. Shortly before Julie's murder, he'd attacked his partner so badly, the couple split up.
He started hitting me, punching me, and then I went upstairs and he came up and he had a pickaxe handle with him. And he just started hitting me all over with it, down, like say, down my right side, my arms, my legs, in between my legs, and punching me. And then the next morning I was just a complete mess. When I got up in the morning, he was there. I managed to get the kids to school. And when I came back, all his stuff had gone.
Violence had been part of Billy Dunlop's life since childhood. He was in and out of care and the courts, despite all efforts to control him.
I tried to model their upbringing and the way I was brought up, which was very, very strict. Certainly smacking him was no good at all. I mean, as I said, you get 1 smack. Next time you do it, you'll get 2. When I got up to 16, it just wasn't working.
9 days after Julie Hogg's body was found by her mother, Billy Dunlop was charged with murder. He was remanded to Durham Prison.
When we went to see him in prison, he said he didn't do it, and I believed him, and so did his mother. He was saying that the police had picked him up and started to fit him up for the crime. And it didn't appear to be a crime that our Billy would do. If he'd have killed somebody, he would have battered them to death.
Another person in 2 minds over Dunlop's guilt or innocence was his common-law wife.
I didn't want to believe it because I had children to him. That's their dad. I didn't want him to be that person for them. But in my heart's heart, I thought, you know, he could have done because of the things that he's done to me.
Dunlop's future was unknown. But Julie's family faced the certainty of her funeral and the ordeal of saying goodbye.
We had the music Ave Maria playing in the church, and I kept thinking the last time was the wedding. And here we are at the funeral, Julie, 22-year-old.
And I was left in the room where the coffin was, because it couldn't be opened, we couldn't see. To be exact, I ended up talking to her. I said, I will get the person responsible. I don't suppose I ever will, but that's the way I feel.
It all came into perspective when we were walking from the cars towards the church. All the people were inside the church and just looking up and looking at the coffin. And I just went hysterical. I was screaming. Nobody would listen. I told him and just took off. I was just screaming at the coffin.
After Julie's funeral, her family bought a bench and put it in the Garden of Remembrance, where her ashes were scattered.
What do you say to a child of 3? He kept saying was wrong in the bathroom. So what we told him was, rightly or wrongly, we told him that his mum had been in the bath and she'd slipped and hit her head because there was no bath mat in the bath. We said she was in heaven, and that sort of pacified him.
Kevin is now 16.
She hasn't been here for me through times when I needed her, like when parents' evenings have been on and family holidays. She hasn't been there to have fun. All I've got is photographs and memories of what I've been told from my nan and granddad and my dad, and my scrapbook, and that's it really.
In May 1991, Billy Dunlop went on trial in Newcastle for Julie Hogg's murder. Her family expected they'd now get justice and closure. The prosecution's case seemed strong. Julie's house keys were discovered under Dunlop's floorboards and had his fingerprints on them. Semen on the blanket around Julie's body could have been his. As Julie's mother found the body, she was a key witness.
You've got a defence barrister asking you questions about when you went into the bathroom, which hand did you put into the bath, to pull the bath panel first, and all the time you're getting flashback one after the other. You can't see anything in a courtroom. All you can see, you're back in the bathroom. You can smell Julie, you can see Julie. One of my main worries was, had he put her under the bath and she was still alive and left her there to die. And all the time, Dunlop is sat in the dock.
I was about 4 foot away from him. He was there and I'm sat above him. And if I'd have got hold of him, there's no doubt about it, I'd have been in prison.
Julie's sex life was raked over by prosecution and defense alike. She'd had many lovers, and her private life was splashed across the newspapers.
The talk was always about Julie's background, not Dunlop's background. It was always Julie. They portrayed her as having a lot of sexual partners. That's what they're saying. If she wasn't that kind of person, it doesn't matter what background you've got, you don't deserve to end up the way Julie ended up. An horrific death like that.
Dunlop had sex with Julie once, in her home, a month before she was murdered. This allowed him to explain away his fingerprints on her keys and his possible DNA on the blanket around the body. 4 days before Julie's murder, she'd refused to have sex with him again. The prosecution alleged he'd tried his luck one more time after the strip show.
You tried it on with her. You tried to persuade her to have sex with you.
No. No, that's not right. I never even went round.
She refused you and you killed her.
I never even went round the house.
You smothered her with a pillow.
I never even went round.
In a rage, you used some instrument on her, causing that massive injury to her vagina. That is what I suggest happened.
That's just pure imagination. I never had nothing to do with it.
Every question that was put to him, he closed his eyes before he answered. And he didn't come over in the witness box as an aggressive type of person.
Dunlop argued that witnesses were lying or mistaken about his movements, that someone had planted Julie's keys in his lodgings.
Are you telling the jury that you have been framed for a murder that you have not committed?
It looks that way, doesn't it? I had nothing to do with it. I know I haven't.
You were sober enough that night after you killed her to make it look as though she'd disappeared.
I never even killed her.
Somebody put the body there.
I didn't put it there. I had nothing to do with it whatsoever.
The failed police search of Julie's house was a gift to the defense. Her body had deteriorated so much that the cause of her death could not be established with certainty. More doubts were sown in the minds of jurors.
Anne and Charlie had sat through the whole of that trial. They'd listened to the evidence. They observed the witnesses as the jury had observed the witnesses. And they, I think, have formed a view that the jury were going to convict.
After a night of deliberation, the jury returned. Against every hope of Julie's family, they couldn't reach a verdict. The judge ordered a retrial.
It was just terrible because you had to go through all the same again when the defence barrister asking you same questions again. And the flashbacks, nightmares, just horrendous. The nightmares before the court case, the flashbacks, smelling Julie while you stood in the witness box.
Yet again, Julie's parents had to hear the harrowing detail of her death. And yet again, a jury failed to agree Dunlop was guilty. Dunlop was formally acquitted of killing Julie Hogg.
That's the point when all of that tension manifested itself in Anne, and she collapsed to the floor. She effectively fainted and screamed, was in floods of tears. And Charlie and I had to effectively lift her out of the court.
The police brought me and my husband home from the court, and just numb with shock. Because at the end of going through all what you'd have to go through, and a trial and a retrial, and no justice for Julie.
Billy Dunlop walked free, legally innocent, whatever anyone suspected. And under an 800-year-old law called double jeopardy, he could never be tried for the same offence again. For Julie's family, that would be salt in wounds that could never heal. Billy Dunlop, free at last, went on television to urge the police to catch Julie Hogg's real killer.
It is just a relief that it's all over with now. They've been pointing the finger at me for 20 months, and they've found now that it was in the wrong direction, and I would like them now to reopen this case and start looking in the right direction.
Are you seeking recompense, compensation?
Well, I feel that I should be given something for the 20 months that I've spent behind bars for something that I haven't done.
A national newspaper offered Dunlop money for his story. He and his common-law wife, Jane Wadsworth, posed for these happy family pictures. But Jane was faking. She dreaded her violent partner's homecoming.
I just cried, because it was just a fear. He's coming home, he's coming out, and I just sat and cried. I didn't want him to come home. I wanted him to stay where he was.
Dunlop soon resumed his heavy drinking in pubs around Billingham. His notoriety and reputation as a hard man spread further after he'd walked free from the Julie Hogg murder trial. Dunlop believed he was beyond the law. Within weeks, he made a startling claim to his partner.
Got me in the kitchen, he got me by the throat, started strangling me up on the kitchen wall, had me picked up by the kitchen wall, strangling me. Just being abusive and all the rest of it and that, and swearing and shouting at me as usual. And saying that he'd kill me. He'd done it before and he'd kill me. He'd got away with it.
Was he trying to intimidate Jane? Or had he really got away with killing Julie? His partner wasn't the only one to hear his murderous boasts.
We went to the police when we were told he'd been boasting about